Larry Grappy. Yeah, I have two grandkids go to school here. Everybody here knows her as Maddie, but I call her Madison May. So, and Preston Grappy in 8th grade. I guess Madison May is going to be leaving after this year, so you just stuck with Preston. I graduated from Ridgemont High School in 1968. Went from high school to factory work. About 10 months later, Uncle Sam sent me a letter asking me if I'd like to join his little travel club. I got drafted May 19th of 1969. I was supposed to have gotten married in June of 1969, but that changed things. We moved things up a little bit. Started out and went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for a week. And they sent me to Fort Gordon, Georgia for basic and ultimately AIT. 8 weeks of, let's put it this way, I've been through 2-a-days in football and that was nothing compared to what we went through in basic and AIT. Coming from a small town like this, not really having a clue what big city life was like. You found out in a hurry the people you was with. Some of them was gang members from New York or Chicago or people just like me that was pretty much backwards. You started learning real quick that you had to grow up because you couldn't be the person you were for the first 19 years of your life.
What was the hardest part about military life?
Being away from home. I think that was, like I said, I'd just gotten married 12 days before I got drafted. So, you miss family, and in my case, you had a new bride waiting for you back home. And the unknown, there was guys that they never took any of it serious. They just cruised through it. They didn't care what happened. For people that was more backwards like I was, it was like, okay, I don't want to screw it up and have to do it all over again. Because if you screwed up too bad, you would do it over again. Nobody wants to go through 8 weeks of that again. I got a basic and got my orders for AIT, which was Advanced Individual Training is what AIT means. Supposedly they taught you everything you needed to know, but they really didn't teach you anywhere near enough. And as difficult as it was, I always thought if I ever was in a situation, I wouldn't be nearly as hard on people as these guys are. By the time I got back from Vietnam, I already knew that if I ever was in a situation where I was teaching kids like that, I'd be probably twice as hard. Because you knew by that time what it took to survive, or at least hopefully survive. Well, I went through NCO school, which was, they was losing so many NCOs in Vietnam that they started school up to run them through and get them over there in leadership positions. And I thought basic and AIT was rough, but NCO school was 12 weeks of making that look easy. I mean, you stop and you think that every place you go, you have to run. You never walk. If you walk, you was pushing away Georgia, which is push-ups. And you did not want to hear somebody hollering, "Candidate, give me 25, you're going too slow." And in NCO school, you had the students had their own cadre. They had company captain, first sergeant, what have you. And we'd come back in from really hard days, and you'd be in formation, and one of the lieutenants or one of the platoon sergeants, the drill sergeants, be up there and they'd say, "Captain, how many push-ups do you think your people can do?" If you're the captain, the student captain, you're trying to think, okay, how low can I make it to go so that my people aren't going to hate me, but how many can I get by with at a high enough number is going to satisfy them, but a low enough number is going to satisfy my people. And by the time they ask you that, you've already done 50 of them. So then he gives them a number that he thinks will make them satisfied, 25, 30, whatever. And no matter, it didn't make any difference what they asked for or what he told them, it wasn't going to be right. So you pushed out the number that your student captain said, and it was going to be wrong. So then they'd tell you, okay, if you can't get that right, then just hit front-leaning rest position, which is a push-up at the up position. Just hold that. Well, try that for 5-10 minutes. It is not easy. So when you got guys that starting to fall down, then they're really busting on you. Well, if you're too wimpy to pull that off, then do it in a low position, which is down. And by the time you get done with this whole mess, it might be 45 minutes later, and that's all you've done. And your body is literally shaken. So that was part of the rough part of that, but the academic part was just as bad. I screwed up on map reading the first part of it, and it takes a long time when you get that low of a grade to build that back up, even though the rest of your grades are pretty, or the rest of your test scores are pretty high. It's just one more thing that they're using to toughen you up and at the same time beat you down so they can make you what they want you to be.
What places were you stationed?
I was in Fort Gordon for basic and AIT, and Fort Benning for NCO school and OJT. OJT is on-the-job training, which doesn't really accomplish a whole lot, but because most of the places they send you, they use you as a clerk typist rather than teaching you what you're supposed to be learning. My MOS, or military occupation specialty, I think, was 1140, which is operations and intelligence, which pretty much meant that either you worked in a battalion headquarters or you went to Recon, battalion Recon, which is what I ended up at. I think it was 30 days between AIT and NCO school, I believe. I had 30 days after I got out before I went to Vietnam. Got Vietnam in May I think it was the 19th, and I went to what they called jungle training, and it was just like all the different things that you're supposed to have an idea of what's going to happen. And the thing that made the biggest impression was you had a captain out there just standing out there talking in front of us. You know, there was stands just like you have out around the track and what have you, and there's probably a couple hundred people there. And in the background you had it sort of set up like it would be around a perimeter, you know, with barbed wire and concertina wire. He was talking about sappers, which is a highly trained NBA. They spend, I think it's like 2 years training. They basically can go about any place that they want to, and you'll never hear them. And the whole time he was out there standing in front of all these people talking, and everybody's pretty much focusing on him. He's probably talking for 15 minutes, and all of a sudden the sapper stands up right behind him. Nobody saw him. He went through this whole system like you would around a base camp. You know, you had claymores aimed out that way. You had barbed wire that's about this far off the ground, stretched both ways. The first thing you're thinking is, my God, if somebody like that can do that, in front of all these people in daylight. How on earth are we going to beat them? That was pretty sobering. But I got out of there. They sent me to the 25th Division, 3rd of the 22nd Battalion. And when I got there, they said, well, the only thing we got's recon. I said, that's fine. That's what I wanted. Did I want to be in the Army? Nope. But at the same time, you get through all that training, and at some point you start to think, I want to go over there and see if anything I learned has stuck with me and makes me capable of doing it, doing the job. I was in Battalion Recon. I was in Recon unit from about 20th of May through, must have been about the end of November. Then I went to Assistant NCO of Operations at Battalion Headquarters. Well, before that, my first offline job, which is offline means when you're out of the field, we had 2 Jeeps. By that time, we were long past out of the Jeeps, and I could go any place I wanted. I was the Jeep commander, and we had 2 machine guns and all the ammunition you could carry. We could go any place we wanted as long as they didn't need us to escort convoys. And at times we was operating out of Swan Lock, and had rubber plantations all around us. And rubber plantations are not good for radio reception. At times we got so far back into rubber plantations that we lost all communications, at which time, when you figure that out, you hurry up and get turned around and get back to where you have communication. And that was actually a really good duty for quite a while, just because you had so much freedom. I mean, that was great. They sent me, when I got off the Jeeps, I went into Battalion Headquarters on my official job, and they sent me as a liaison for a couple weeks with a mech unit, which was all armored personnel carriers and a couple tanks.
How did you stay in touch with your family?
Letters, cassettes. It took 7 days for my letter to get back home to my family. It took 7 days to get back. Everything I sent out, all I had to do was write free up where the stamp went. So it didn't cost us anything. When I got over there, I noticed that some of the guys were sending cassette tapes home. So I started doing that. I'm pretty sure I got about every letter that was ever sent back and forth between us, and probably all of the tapes. I've never gone through any of them, but they're there. Maybe somebody will go through them sometime.
What were your living conditions and supplies like?
When I first got there, we were what they call a rat patrol. We had 4 Jeeps and a 3/4 ton pickup. They had machine guns on every one of them. And we was living in tents then. But when I first got there, I got there one day, and that night they come around and said, we're going to Cambodia tomorrow, and that was when the invasion of Cambodia was. It won't be overnight, it'll just be tomorrow, and then we'll come back. Well, we didn't get back till 2 weeks later. And we didn't go back, we went to a totally different place. We were in 6 firefights in 10 days. The last firefight, we lost 3 people. After that, we went to Dao Tiang, and it wasn't bad. We was in a base camp every night. We still was on Jeeps, and Jeeps sort of leave a lot to be desired as far as being able to cover ground. They come up with a bright idea that, okay, we have a artillery unit 7 miles down the end of the road. So we want you guys to take metal detectors and do a mine sweep every morning. Being young guys and GIs that's trying to figure out the easiest way of getting around it. After about 2 or 3 days, it's like, that 7 miles is a long ways to walk. So they took one of the Jeeps and they decided they could sit on the front bumper and do the same thing, just drive slow. One on each side. After 2 or 3 days of that, they speed up. We're still too slow. And after about another week, they just went fast they could go down the road because we were young and indestructible. Wasn't the smartest thing to do, not by any means. In fact, we had 2 teams that did it. I had 1 day off. A close friend of mine from Idaho, he was on the other team, and he came back and he was still laughing. He said, "What's so funny?" He said, "Well, I was going down through there, and one of the new guys said, 'What are we doing?' He said, when I explained it to him, he said he just turned white. He said he looked like a ghost." Well, that's when you get guys that are young and they think they're indestructible, that's what you get. It was, I mean, we had a lot of funny times, but we also had a lot of dead serious times. I told people at different times that there was times when I was pretty sure that my buttons on my uniform was entirely too thick. And he looked at me like, "How could your buttons be too thick?" Well, there was times when I wanted that extra 1/16 of an inch gone so I could get closer to the ground. I didn't want to be up any higher than I had to be. We was in Daotiang for a while. I can't remember exactly how long. And the whole battalion was switched to or sent to Swan Lock because the battalion that was there was down to, I think it was like 36% because of malaria. And they sent us up to replace them and sent them someplace just to recover and get new people. And of course, I got malaria. And there was being in the military rumors are always flying. You had to take these pretty good sized orange pills, and the rumors started going around that don't take those things because there's guys starting to have trouble going blind, so we quit taking them. So I wasn't alone. I was there with my company commander, my platoon leader, almost probably 2/3 of the platoon, which our platoon wasn't very big. We probably operated with 15 people. Once in a while we would operate with a couple sniper teams, and that would bring us up to about 25, but for the most part we was probably 12 to 15, 16 people. And we were sort of the colonel's play toy. It was like we flew on choppers a lot, dropped us into here, and if nothing was there, pick us up, drop us someplace else. I think it was basically, let's drop recon in and see if anything happens, and if it does, we'll develop the situation, which meant that they would bring in, hopefully, another line company to get us out. But for the most part, I think we was these play toys. Pretty expensive play toy, but when you're a colonel, I guess you can do those things.
What was the food like?
Well, most of the time I ate sea rations. I mean, even when we had a mess hall, the food was usually so bad you obtain a case of sea rations and you heat them up. you eat those instead of whatever they had. All you needed was a stick of C4 explosives because it burned about, 3,000 degrees. A little piece about the size of your thumbnail. It would heat just about anything that you wanted, boil water in about 30, 40 seconds. As long as you had that, you were good.
How did people entertain themselves?
If there was beer available, that's how most of the guys did. I didn't drink, so, just part of the party. Just whatever come to mind. It might be a knife throwing contest, or we'd convince the supply sergeant or supply officer, hey, give us a bunch of ammo, going out to the shooting range, see what we can hit. So the American people a lot of times paid probably $10,000 for us to go out on the range and just blow away that much ammunition. So it wasn't very economical, but it kept everybody satisfied. You just counted the days until you got to take one of those jetliners back home. Called them freedom birds. So when you was over in Vietnam, you looked up and saw a big old jetliner. It was like somebody's going home, or somebody's coming in. So when you were coming in, there was always another line of people that was waiting to take that same jet back home. A lot of those guys was infantry, and you could tell who the guys were that'd been out in the field because they might have clean fatigues on, but they were faded out. Their shoes hadn't seen polished since the day they was made. The thing was, a day or two before that, they was out in the field. They took them out in time to get their paperwork done and be at this point at a certain time.
What was it like coming home?
Oh, for me, it wasn't really. I got into, I think it was Travis Air Base in San Francisco. I got there at midnight, left at midnight the next day. So I didn't go through any airports where it had protesters or anything like that. Everybody got a free steak dinner when he came back. They gave me my card, and I probably still got it someplace. I didn't care about steak. All I wanted was get home. I had a wife and a baby girl by that time. My daughter was 5 months old before I ever saw her. There was a lot of guys that didn't have anybody to come home with to because they got Dear John leather. I'm lucky. When I came home, I had a wife that stuck by me. That wasn't the case in a lot of times. There was a lot of guys that their wives or girlfriends just sent them letters saying, I can't wait for you. And I was not the same person that left. Like I said, I was backwards. When I get back, I was a totally different person, and that's not necessarily a good way.
What do you think young people today should know about serving your country?
If you're looking for a way to get a good college education and still serve your country too, when I was in the service, you didn't have that many choices on what your MOS or job could be. Nowadays, they have so many different things. It's not just infantry. It's, from computers to supply to you name it. So yeah, you could possibly get deployed. Probably a lot less chance of that now since we're pretty much out of Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever they've been. And you can get an education when you get out. And it's a good way not to end up with $100,000 of debt. It is not the same thing going through basic as when I went through basic. If you don't like it nowadays, I guess you can just leave. Just tell them, nope, this isn't for me. It's not the same thing as what I went through. you're going to get experience that you're never going to get in the workplace. If you work hard, you know, you learn the leadership skills that is going to set you up later. You know, get that college degree and not have any debt. I've watched all the ones that you've already done twice. Mark Paul, you know, like he said, he was 58th out of 60 kids in his class. And he had 2 degrees, was working on his master's. And he doesn't have a penny in it. He hasn't even used his GI Bill yet. So his kids can use it. You know, that's a big thing.
For young kids today who really don't know anything about Vietnam War, what, other than what they hear in the press, what would you like them to understand?
It was unnecessary. When I came back, I thought, you know, we could have won that if we had fought it the right way. Unfortunately, politicians set so many guidelines and they did the same thing in Iraq and Afghanistan. You can't fight something like that with politicians running the show. Politicians probably got more guys killed over there than people imagine because of so many rules that we were at the artillery base at the end of the road when we was at Dao Tiang. And that was a free fire zone. There was nothing anywhere around, which meant that if it was out there, you can shoot. And about 200 yards out, 2 guys come out, black PJs on, but you had AK-47s on their shoulders. Free fire zone. We had the snipers with us. 200 yards, that's a piece of cake shot for them. But the commander of the artillery unit said, maybe I better check just to make sure. So he did. And we got nope, don't shoot. Well, no, wait a minute, it's a free fire zone. But when you got the don't shoot, it meant that to get permission for something like that, you went through, I think it was 7 layers of bureaucracy, which meant that some village chief or province chief somewhere wasn't sure where his boy was. And he knew good and well that he was working with the VC. Those was VC out there. There was no question about that. The local people knew you don't go out there in the daytime in a free fire zone. You might sneak through in the night, but you don't go out there in the daytime. And it was just one more rule that the politicians put in. When you get home, most of us didn't talk. Well, you might have tried to talk to people about it, but nobody wanted to hear. The one time I was telling you, when there's 6 firefights in 10 days. That was written up in one of the Vietnam magazines. And my mom never wanted to know anything. So I just handed it to her and told her, here, read this. And that was the only thing that she ever knew about. And my dad started asking questions just before he passed away. But nobody knew. Didn't want to know. My wife was the same way. And that's not, it's not bad, it's just talking about it is actually probably what is the better healing force for something like that. One of the guys I was pretty close with in Recon lived in Idaho, and it got to the point where I think it was 85, and then again 88, and again 92. I would fly out and go elk hunting with him. And it didn't make a bit of difference whether we saw elk or anything else because you could talk to each other. And my best friend was a Marine crew chief on helicopters. And he'd been through a lot. But I couldn't talk to him like I could Danny out in Idaho, because his experience was totally different than mine. So it's just that difference and things like that. So as a result, over the years, you just told people stories about the funny stuff. I think it's great. I mean, I think it's great that you got, a history class like this, because it's unlike any history class that I ever had. Your living history class is a small one, and that's something that seems like it should be for everybody. I realize that a lot of people don't really care about history, and in a way, I was that way at one time. It happened 50 years ago, but so did World War II when I was a kid. But it's still something that, like your sign back there said, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. But the only problem with that is the people that repeat it, they're not so much that they don't learn from it. It's just that they think, well, I'm smarter than those people were. When it's all said and done, they find out that they're not a bit smarter, and you screwed up and made the same mistakes that was already made. And that's frustrating for people that ultimately pay the price. And proof of that is, you look at what happened in Vietnam, how we ended up getting in that mess, and they did the exact same thing in Iraq and Afghanistan. The exact same thing. And people thought 10 years in Vietnam was bad. Well, it was 20 years. The only saving grace was it wasn't 58,000 plus names on that wall in 20 years. There's so many guys that, no, they didn't get killed, but they're going to pay the price for years and years to come.